Vice President, Chief Responsible AI Officer, Microsoft. Over to you, Shruti.
Thank you, Swati. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, AI, as we all know, is no longer just about algorithms. It's about power, partnerships, and geopolitics. From semiconductor export controls and US-China tech tensions to India's sovereign AI push, the global race is accelerating. But scale isn't enough. The real question is, who builds AI that the world can trust? So what does a credible, democratic AI ecosystem look like? And can partnerships truly deliver at scale? Let's find out. Thank you so much for your time today. Let me quickly start with Natasha with a broad question. Microsoft has announced a $50 billion commitment to the Global South by the end of this decade. And here we have the India AI Summit, one of the largest global AI gatherings. What does it mean for India to be sort of hosting the summit at this scale? How significant is this moment for India's role in sort of shaping the global AI order?
Well, first, it's wonderful to be here with everyone today. I think what India hosting this Impact Summit really shows is that AI diffusion has become a core strategic question. It is not an open question as to whether the technology will diffuse. The question is, will it diffuse evenly?
Yes.
And actually what we're seeing so far is that is not the case. We're seeing adoption in the global north be roughly double what we see in the global south. And I think India is really uniquely placed here to drive impact. It's a large democracy. It has a large developer ecosystem. It also has scale and diversity needs that really reflect very many of the needs in the global south. So this is really the hypothesis behind our $50 billion investment. We're here because we think we need to build infrastructure and skills, multilingual capability, local innovation, and making sure that we are measuring our progress.
Sure. Gregory, coming to you in your recent AI policy podcast, you spoke about the geopolitical risk of black box models. In 2026, where, we've seen some nations use AI as mass surveillance, how do countries really like the US and the India build what you've described as democratic AI shield that perhaps developing nations can genuinely trust?
Well, I think there's actually a lot of good news on this score. The term black box AI was absolutely true 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but we've actually seen a great deal of technical progress in terms of understanding what's under the hood, how these works. And understanding what is going on is a critical underpinning of knowing that it's going to work reliably and as intended over the full range of uses. At this India AI Summit, we've heard a lot about trust, but we don't want you to just trust blindly.
Yeah.
We want to earn and deserve your trust, not just have it. And in terms of where we are technically, in terms of where we are procedurally, it's actually dramatically better than it was even just 12 months ago.
Okay.
And I think that's why adoption continues to accelerate.
So, is the world formally in sort of a AI Cold War? Would you say that? And if so, does India have the strategic autonomy to sort of collaborate with the US while maintaining flexibility with other global players?
Well, I think there's a few things that I would say there. First of which is it's true that the US AI Action Plan explicitly compared the AI race to the space race during the Cold War. This is a narrative that's very prominent in American politics and Chinese politics. In terms of India, what we've seen recently is that with the conclusion of the US-India trade agreement, there's a lot of positive momentum in this relationship. In fact, Undersecretary of State Jacob Hellberg just invited India to join the Pax Silica initiative about resilient supply chains focused on AI and semiconductors. I wouldn't be surprised if that announcement comes this very week at this very summit. So US and India are drawing closer together.
Well, fingers crossed. Before I get you to Aalok, Gregory, one more question for you. You've been at the center of the debate of the GPU export controls. Now, given India's evolved trusted partner status in 2026, is Washington now sort of comfortable providing access to the highest end AI chips to India, or are we still seeing some red lines?
I think that's what the Pax Silica agreement is going to solve and resolve in terms of an answer to the question. But to a certain extent, it was already resolved. When you see companies like Microsoft, AWS, Google, investing tens of billions of dollars in AI infrastructure.
Yeah.
What's inside that AI infrastructure? It's the most advanced chips. So the point is, these products are already in India. They're going to come to India at a massive, massive scale. And so, yes, the US and India are going to be partners at the AI frontier.
All right, Aalok, let me get you in now. India wants to deploy AI at population scale, be it agriculture, healthcare, or skilling. So can enterprise AI really scale without strong public infrastructure underneath it? Or is DPI now the core strategic AI asset?
Yeah, I think what DPI shows is that it is possible for a country like India to innovate at the application level. And I think that they're well positioned to continue to innovate when it comes to AI. So that they may not have been the leader when it came to broadband infrastructure, but they really were pioneers in all sorts of payment systems, identification systems, and privacy technology. And I think that that same spirit and ethos can be brought to AI applications. I think there are a number of realms in India, things like agriculture, medicine, linguistics, and translation, that India is well posed to be a world leader in.
All right. Gregory, you've also written extensively on DeepSeek and efficiency-driven models. So what can India really draw from that kind of frugal innovation as it builds sovereign AI capabilities on a far tighter budget than Silicon Valley?
Well, I think the DeepSeek moment was a seismic event in the US stock market, in the global media ecosystem, but it was vastly overhyped. I mean, the reality is it was promoted as something that was going to put NVIDIA out of business. Does NVIDIA look like it's really struggling right now? Now, in terms of algorithmic efficiency, in terms of how much intelligence you can get out of every input unit of computation, that is an exponential trend that has been going on for more than a decade. And DeepSeek did demonstrate another level of algorithmic efficiency. But that is just one dot on the graph, and every other dot on that graph comes from American companies, UK companies, et cetera, and all of those efficiency gains are being plowed back into American companies, which are continuing to build data centers that don't just have one GPU or hundreds of GPUs, but now this year, millions of GPUs. So the demand for compute continues to go, and the United States continues to enjoy a significant advantage there.
Okay. Aalok, you've warned sort of about the state-level AI regulations in the US creating a patchwork of compliance standards. As Indian states like, we've got Tamil Nadu and Telangana draft their own AI frameworks, how do we avoid a compliance patchwork that sort of slows down enterprise adoption?
Yeah, well, what I hope India does is sort of learn some lessons from the US, where we've had very unproductive tensions between state attempts to regulate AI and federal attempts. So I think the approach here is that there are some things that are better suited for regulation at the federal level. So these are things that affect technology across all states or universally. And so things like privacy, regulation of model development, this is important to do at the federal level, so you avoid having companies have to have different compliance regimes all across different states and even different countries. What states, I think, are well positioned to do are they're closest to the kinds of problems affecting people, and so they're really well positioned to help shape applications, shape use cases that will really help people. And I think the other thing states can really do is that they are places where you can trial regulation in a small scale. So maybe it's not appropriate to initially pass something that affects 1 billion people, but you can pass regulation at a smaller level, learn lessons, and then the federal government can adopt those lessons, figure out what works, and bring that to the national level.
Well, great insights there. Natasha, coming back to you, you've been Microsoft's Chief Responsible Officer since 2019, the first such role in the industry. When, enterprises deploy AI at scale, what's the biggest gap that you see between responsible AI principles on paper and actual implementation in production?
So you hit the nail on the head. Principles are essential in this space, but they're definitely not enough alone. And so the gap that needs to be filled is how you turn a high-level commitment to transparency into real passions and practices that you can adopt every day. So what I see happening in this front in India is that because of the real focus on impact for people to expand opportunity, we see very applied uses of AI. We can build passions where we're designing responsible guardrails into those systems from the very beginning, measuring them, making sure that they perform not just well in the lab, but in the world as well. So it's all about making sure that there are these tools and practices to really make this real at scale, so that we can make sure that we are delivering the benefits of this technology broadly.
All right. Aalok, coming back to you, we all know enterprise AI is accelerating, but trust remains the friction point. From a governance standpoint, what does a truly trusted AI system require? Does it require data localization, open models? What does it truly require?
I think that really depends in part on where you are and what country you are, but I do think there are some basic things that we've seen around the world that give an indication of what you need for people to trust AI technology. So that is a government that is responsive to the needs of the people and sort of understands what it is that they're looking for. Things like privacy baseline protections are important. People want to be able to trust that the technology that they're working on working with will protect their data. And I think that a big part of trust is an idea that the government will continue to engage and evolve their policies as technology updates. So we've seen rapid innovation in AI, and I think an important part of the trust here is that a clear sign from governments that they will continue to evolve how they think about AI as the technology develops.
All right. Natasha, on similar lines, companies, while they are producing more AI tools and reports, yet compliance confidence is shrinking. As enterprises today race to deploy generative AI, what does smart, agile compliance look like? Governance that sort of reduces risk than just creating paperwork.
Absolutely. I think we think about governance as being a real enabler of adoption, but it does need to be smart governance. So I think first you need to start with a clear point of view about the outcomes that you are trying to drive. How is it that this AI system will help this agricultural community? How is it that this AI system will help improve a healthcare outcome? You need to know what you're seeking to achieve, number one. You then need to find ways to measure that you are getting to that outcome. I think measurement here is just a critical best practice that we need to apply across the board. Third, we should see AI as a tool that we can use for the smart governance of AI. There are lots of ways that we can scale up our work by using AI effectively in a governance context, and this is part of what we do at Microsoft on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Natasha, in the beginning, you sort of mentioned that AI usage in the global north is roughly double that of the global south, and that gap is widening. So beyond infrastructure, what are the critical levers that are needed to ensure that AI benefits are distributed more broadly?
Absolutely. I'd point to three critical interventions. First, skilling. What we know from the history of general purpose technologies like electricity, like AI, is that the economies that embrace them the best and do sort of grow their economies and their societal opportunity off the back of it, they're not necessarily the inventors of the technology. They are the largest adopters of the technology. And what's the key unlock that you need to adopt broadly? You need broad-based skilling programs. So skilling is a critical enabler here. Second, we need to make sure that we've got AI systems that work well in the languages that people use. This has been a key part of the discussion here at the India AI Impact Summit. India has a beautiful tradition of linguistic and cultural diversity. We need to make sure that all of those spoken languages are well represented in the systems that are being used broadly around the world. The third intervention that I point to is we really need to track the data that shows how AI is being adopted across the economy. We need to see that data so that we can more precisely target future interventions. We might need more infrastructure in some places. We might need more skilling. We might need broader access to the technology. But we need to study that adoption data so that we can really guide future investments.
All right. Aalok, from an India point of view, with nearly 5 million Indians in IT services, how do we design sort of a safety net that not just protects jobs, but actively funds transitions into AI-augmented roles? How do we do that? And, Gregory, feel free to add to him. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very important question, and I think one we need to directly address head on. This is something we're thinking a lot about at CSIS. I think... I think it's very likely that we'll see significant job losses. Certainly, there will be significant job transitions. Everyone's job will be different in an age of AI. And I think what we really need to do is we just need more ammunition in terms of our policy responses. So you will hear talk about reskilling. I think that's an important component here. But I think also important are things like help with job placement, sort of help with the transition between
Absolutely,
jobs,
yeah.
As well as a sort of thinking about the institutions of government and of society in terms of attitude towards jobs, support when people are transitioning between jobs, how employers think about gaps on resumes or gaps in employment. I think all of that is important. We need many more solutions so we can address this in many different ways.
What more solutions? How do we protect jobs?
Well, I think one thing to note here is that every technology that dramatically improves the productivity of workers has the potential for, if not job destruction, at least job disruption. So it may be the case that those productivity benefits, when they are plowed back into the economy, are actually going to create more demand for more workers. But there will still be this period of displacement as roles are dealt with. Just to think about it, the job of computer programmer didn't even really exist 50 years ago, right?
Yes.
And as we created the industry of computers, we got rid of the job of doing mathematics by pen and paper, but we created this new series of jobs of computer programmers. And we're already seeing some hints of the new job categories that are going to exist, but we need to spend more time imagining what the skills demands of the future are and ensuring that populations are ready to serve the needs of the future economy.
Absolutely. And on the topic of reskilling, Natasha, Microsoft has committed to equipping 20 million people in India with AI skills by 2030, training 2 billion educators and localizing co-pilot data processing. When democracies talk about trusted AI partnerships, what does measurable success really look like on ground?
I think this is a great question because, we shouldn't just be thinking about the scale of announcements. We should be thinking about the concrete improvements that we're making to people's lives as a consequence of this skilling effort. So first, to get to real outcomes here, we have to be clear about what the path to impact is. For our skilling commitment, we are going to make sure that 20 million teachers have the skills to thrive in the classroom, work with their students in an AI-powered world. But skilling alone would not be enough. We need to make sure there is that multilingual capability in the technology itself. We need to make sure that there is the access to the technology. So we've got to be clear about first what the path to impact is. Second, we have to get back to the outcomes. We have to make sure that it's the outcome that we measure is not just the number of teachers that have completed the program, but what are the educational outcomes that we have improved. And say, third, we want to make sure that This is not a standalone, separated from the community type of skilling effort. We have to make sure that our teachers are working closely with the parents, the broader community around the education system to make sure that there is that participation, there is that trust, because ultimately it is going to take broad community participation to really take full advantage of the benefits of this technology.
All right, moving on, Gregory, at this summit, you're also chairing a session on national security readiness. What is the biggest hidden threat that democracies like the India and US face at the intersection of AI and shared digital infrastructure?
Well, as computers have gotten more sophisticated, we've relied upon them for more things. And what that means is that the threats to that computer infrastructure becomes bigger in magnitude and impact if there's some kind of disruption.
Cyber escalation, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, just to put it in one terms, if you drive a car today and somebody hacks your car, maybe they can prevent you from turning it on. In the future, where more and more cars are autonomous, if they hack your car, maybe they can drive you off a cliff, right? I'm exaggerating for effect, but the basic point is as AI enables us to rely more and more on automation, the scale of cyber attacks aimed at that automation and associated vulnerabilities has a bigger and bigger potential. The good news here is that AI is a powerful general purpose technology, which means it has big benefits to cyber offense, which can be a little bit frightening, but also big benefits to cyber defense.
All right. We have a few minutes left, so I'll just wrap up quickly. But looking ahead to 2030, Gregory, what does a meaningful India-US partnership look like? Is it joint model training, semiconductor fabrication, collaboration, or sharing export control alignment?
Well, if you look at what's going on just in India, I mean, India has been in a real fight, a military fight with China in just recent years. And the United States was quick to offer whatever support diplomatically and otherwise that it could. So I think India knows who its friends are in this story. And the other good news is that as we look to the future of de-risking, whether that's from an economic coercion perspective, actually India is in a great position to benefit from countries around the world looking to China as a threat. There's an opportunity for India to sort of pick up the slack in manufacturing, in digital services, and it's also an attractive consumer market for all different kinds of economic activity.
All right, Aalok, final question. If you were advising Indian policymakers today, what is that one non-negotiable priority for AI leadership over the next 3 years?
Yeah, I think that trying to compete in developing frontier models is not the right solution. I think just as India did with its digital public infrastructure, its advantage is in building applications that sit on top of these models. And really, the government should focus on figuring out the use cases that are unique to India, figuring out the advantages it has in data and, for example, linguistic data, making sure that that data is available to train models, and facilitating the deployment of these applications so that they can touch the lives of people around the country.
All right, Natasha, final words. As enterprises adopt co-pilot systems, agentic AI, how do we ensure human oversight remains meaningful, especially in sectors like healthcare, defense, finance?
So designing the systems with humans in the loop is going to be an essential step at this stage of the capabilities development. So making sure that those humans are at the right points and validating steps is the most important thing right now. Now, as the systems increase in their capability, we will be building in different forms of human oversight. But I think we've got to come back to what is true for AI systems of the past and AI systems of the future, which is that they are there to empower people. There are design patterns that you follow to achieve that end, but we need to just always keep in mind these are tools to empower people to have more impact.
Absolutely. And on that note, it's time for me to wrap up our conversation. Many thanks for your invaluable insights. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, panelists, for that very informative session. Well, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to our next conversation. Now, behind every AI breakthrough lies resilience.